the BAFTA goes to The Missing Children.
Thank you so much. It's an incredible honour for us to win this award for our documentary. It took us 3 years to make this film. It's a documentary about a mother and baby home in Ireland where women who were pregnant and not married had to go to give up their children, and it was part of a whole system in Ireland of Catholic institutions, and we now know that 9,000 children died in institutions across the country and thousands more were trafficked to America for adoption. So
It really struck me how some of the death certs said marasmus. Now, marasmus is starvation. The nuns were paid by the state to look after these children. They got a capitation grant, which meant that they had the money to spend on the children. We know now they died from terrible causes. A lot of it coming up in the death cert was actually marasmus. Now that is starvation. And I would believe that the babies were just neglected, and if they were ill, I would doubt there was any fuss made over them.
And 6,000 babies died in Ireland's mother and baby homes from diseases that read like a litany of neglect.
Marasmus is malnutrition. Why does a baby, where these people are being paid money to look after them, die of malnutrition?
Why was there such neglect? Why was there such a high death rates? That high death rate must be looked into, and why it happened and how it happened by those who were in charge of the homes. And
the other point you were making on marasmus has been taken as this starvation, as evidence of starvation, and everybody has ran with it. There are 10 cases where it was the primary cause of death in Tuam, 14 in total. That's less than 2% of all the deaths. Now, if the ones were starving people, they'd be starving a lot more than just 2%. It's as simple as that. You don't have to go very, very much further than that. The other point is that if you go and you look at all the other maternity hospitals, they also had deaths from marasmus. How come you're not up there charging the rotunda with murdering babies? Yes. Yeah. No, it's as simple as that.
Everybody thought the nuns were beautiful people, lovely people, helping everything. And I suppose when my mother went down there, she thought, oh yeah, the nuns, this will be lovely now, they look after us. And even her mother and father, they'd be thinking the same way, not realising at all what it was like.
And why did not one nun come forward and say, it was wrong what we did in Tuam? My mother got pregnant outside of marriage. And of course, that was a big sin. And the priest in the parish got to hear about it and told her parents that it was an awful disgrace, that she couldn't be seen out because she'd be a bad influence. So they told her then that when the baby is due, that she was to be taken to Tuam, the home in Tuam, and the nuns would look after her there. Then they opened the door and told her she'll have to leave. And she said, I want my son. And they just closed the door on her face. And every week then she would walk from the centre of Tuam out the Dublin Road every week for 5.5 years, knocking on the door. I want to take my son out there. That's my son you have in there. I want to rear him. This would be the road my mother would have taken every week for 5.5 years to come out and try and get me out of the home. But the nuns wouldn't allow it. That they told her that he was going to be fostered out. That was very sad for her. So when the 12 months was up, then they opened the door and told her she'd have to leave.
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do. And now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. I just gotta get through, I just gotta get through. Cause I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. Sometimes I feel like all is lost, but I know it's not true. I wanna put up all my...
It wasn't only the children who suffered. Many mothers forced to leave their babies found it hard to accept. PJ's birth mother Eileen spent 11 years working in the local hospital, hoping someday to make a home with him.
Once was up, she was shown the door and told to get out, that I was going to be fostered out. So she went down to the hospital in Tuam and got a job there as a cleaner. So when the 12 months was up, then they opened the door and told her she'd have to leave. They made all the decisions. Now, if my mother had £100 that time, which you couldn't, totally impossible, she could have bought me, but they hadn't the money back in them days. So she went around Tuam looking for work then because she didn't want to leave me there. She always had in her mind, I'm going to take him out of there. So she got work then as a cleaner in the hospital in Tuam. It's closed down now since. And every week for 5.5 years, she would walk to that home. So after 12 months then, the door was open, she was told to leave. And she said, I want to take my son with me. I said, no, he's going to be fostered out. She got work in Tuam as a cleaner in the hospital. And every week for 5.5 years, she knocked on that door. And the doors open, and they'd ask her, what she want? I want my son. I want to take him away from here. And they said, no, go away, close the door.
It was completely illegal.
Yeah.
Utterly illegal. It makes my blood boil to think.
They told her, no.
You didn't know that till years later, though,
I
did you?
didn't know till I met her.
Yeah.
Yes, I got a phone call from Tusla in Galway, and they told me that they found a file belonged to me that I was looking for years. And in that, there's a letter in there where she left here a very sick woman after 12 months, and she couldn't get work because she was so sick. But that she wrote a letter back to them stating that as soon as she get a job, that she would pay the 5 shilling towards the upkeep of me. And I think that hurt me very much for what she went through.
And which was no small sum of money then.
Oh, it's like that was like, you know, yeah. 5 shillings.
And tell us, has it been difficult to find out your story, you know, as regards documents and things like that?
It was very hard. My mother had £100 that time, which you couldn't, totally impossible. She could have bought me.
the will isn't there, as far as I can see, with the government, just to get this sorted, to get the babies out. All we're asking is to take them out of that sewage area, because they deserved a burial. They were christened, and canon law states that the babies, children who are christened, should have to be in a sanctified area. So, I mean, church and state still seem to be closing their eyes to that. They're up to 3 years old, those little toddlers and babies. They're in a sewage facility. Saw the mothers as sinners. They saw the children as sinners as well. They were no better. They were the offspring of sinners. They didn't seem to matter. The babies didn't matter. It didn't matter that they died in their hundreds, and it didn't matter how they were buried.
We have to ask ourselves some really hard questions about why the lives of those little children were just simply not as valued as the lives of other children.
So did we find out why the mortality rate was so high in these places?
Among the children who were institutionalised, one of the main theories at the time was the spread of gastroenteritis, infectious diseases among these children. So if you had an outbreak of something like gastroenteritis and these children were in these small little cots all lined up together, sometimes more than one child in a cot, those infections just spread incredibly quickly through the wards. Also things like measles, any of those sort of epidemic diseases would spread very quickly.
And became fatal then?
Became very fatal very quickly, and the medical attention was not always as it should have been in these homes. Pelletstown was quite well serviced in terms of medical personnel and nurses, but some of the special homes, as they were called, were actually quite poorly catered for in terms of medical care.
And is there anything that you've seen thus far in relation to the Tuam mother and baby home that would say there was an exceptionally high mortality rate there?
No. In fact, the highest, the one that's...
More than likely they died of infectious disease called gastroenteritis. It was a highly infectious disease that killed most babies in Ireland before the 1940s. And one way of preventing gastroenteritis was breastfeeding. And of course, if these mothers were being separated from their babies, then what were their chances of breastfeeding?